And good evening and welcome to Monday, my fellow Druids. How are you all this evening? It's good to be back. welcome to a very stuffy and warm UK. Actually, it's I'm going to be melting by the end of this stream. I've got the windows open, so hopefully, actually, I can't hear any space birds. I can hear my wife in the next room. She doesn't count as a space bird, by the way. I can't get away with saying that. There might be neighbours outside because it's intolerably hot for me anyway. DO997 here in Romania, floods and heavy storms. There have been some, actually across Europe there's been some nasty floods and things. We haven't had much rain here in the UK in the last few days, but So I hope you're all okay in other parts of Europe. I did see some thunderstorms out there as well. So be safe. It's not good. I realise my hat's not straight. Starting for that. There we go. The space birds melted. Yeah, they probably did actually. I can't hear them. So it's all a bit crazy. You might be able to make out my wife in the background. She's doing a call to some of her friends as well, doing stuff. What's the temp here at the moment? It's 26 still. That's centigrade, which I know isn't hugely vastly high compared to some places, but it's pretty warm for here. I complain about this. I mean, the British people. Okay, the British people are notoriously bad at complaining about the weather because we have an awful lot of weather. We don't really have any climate in the UK. I mean, obviously it's hotter in summer than it is in the winter, but basically in the UK you can pretty much have any weather at any time of the year, with a few variations. It can be chucking it down, freezing cold one day and then hot the next, and as a result it's quite unpredictable. So British people talk about the weather a lot, we're famous for it. So that 29 says Mad Monks off, 26 in Liverpool. We had a little bit of thunder rumbling today, this afternoon, but it didn't amount to anything. A Clapong says that it's only 18 in Poland. That sounds nice. 26 in Yorkshire, so up and down the UK it's definitely hot. The Northern Isles is covered in clouds, as Commander requests. So that's nice. Good old Scotland covered in clouds. See, I don't personally. I'm not a big fan of heat. Okay, I love sunshine, and but to be honest, anything above 25, and I start to. I'm a bit like a PC with an inadequate cooling fan. Okay, I start to slow down quite dramatically. So I'm not comfortable at anything above 25 at all. Some people love the heat. I don't like it. I can't sleep properly. I can't work properly. You start involuntarily sweating. It's just horrible. Anything. I'm much happier below 25, and I can cope with cold temperatures, no problem at all. 5 to 20. I think I'm right there. Yes. In Magneto, 31 in Slough. We hate it, my precious. Yes, 31 is bad. We got thunder. There's a really cool website actually called lightningmaps.org, I think, or something, which shows you real time. I don't know how it works. It's rather clever. Real-time lightning strikes, and it's actually really it's surprisingly accurate. It looks really kind of apocalyptic because it has these expanding rings of the thunder noise from the lightning. It shows you where the lightning strike is on a Google Maps type thing, and then there's this circle that expands, and of course you realise that's the sound of the thunder travelling outwards from the point of the lightning strike, and you can see it expand across the map. It's like an asteroid strike. You kind of go watch this expanding wave of sound, which presumably is travelling about 600 miles an hour. That's the speed of sound, isn't it? And then as that circle goes across your destination, if it's not too far away, you hear the thunder. It's very, very cool. So definitely. Definitely check that out if you're in a thunderstorm. It's quite fun to watch what's actually going on. Commander O'Connor says he's 15 and a good Scottish fog. See, I aspire to have a good Scottish fog. I'd much rather be in a good Scottish fog than 25 degrees here. I like the sun. I do like the sun, but I do not like the heat. And the worst, actually, I don't like the humidity. It's probably the humidity that's actually the killer, because you start sweating. I can always feel it. I'm just sitting here talking, it's not burning much to use it. You just get hot. The only problem is I've got I've got my PC, which obviously is air cooled, so that's chucking out some heat at my feet. I've got 3 lights here. There are 3 lights, okay? There are 3 lights. Not 5, 3. Sci-fi reference for those of you who know. And they're LEDs, so they're not chucking out vast amounts of heat, but they're chucking out enough heat. It's like having a small heater pointed at your face in order to do streaming. Plus there's the 2 monitors, okay, so they're not super hot, but they're all generating a bit of heat. And they're quite nice in the winter time because each device is sort of slowly contributing to heating the house up, so the gas doesn't have to work quite so hard. But in the summer, it's just excess heat that you can't get rid of, which is really annoying. So yes, I know it's a first world problem. I am aware of this. Darn, my high-tech computer's making me feel a bit hot. Yep. Which is yeah. I shouldn't really complain, should I? But yeah, I'm British. I'm supposed to complain. That's what we do. It's just slightly too warm. It's basically the summation of the first 6 minutes of me having a whinge. It's slightly too hot for my comfort. There are bigger problems in the world. It has to be seen. So actually, and across the world, of course, it's been seriously bad. I mean, southwestern Canada, northwestern United States, North America. That western part got hit by a really nasty heat wave. Which is insanely scary. 48 degrees. I can't even imagine what 48 degrees centigrade is like. I've never been anything that hot. That would. I think I don't know what would happen to me in that situation. I think I would probably just. I don't know. That just sounds totally intolerable. That sounds like being in an oven. That's an awful level of temperature. I think you can't. I'd be surprised if you can operate in that temperature because that's once you go above the actual temperature of the human body. You start running into all sorts of troubles, don't you? So that's really, really not good. Wouldn't like that at all. Mad Monk says I don't like the summer. I have to wear sun cream in the sun. I must admit, I've never burnt. I haven't really got a suntan, a tiny bit maybe, but I haven't. And this is a good distraction, isn't it? Sunburn, but I don't really burn. I'm one of those people who just slowly goes brown. I'm quite fortunate that I don't actually. But I presume if you put me in 48 degrees centigrade in the sun all day, then probably I would burn. But a few hours exposure in the sun doesn't usually bother me. I tend to tan quite fast, and of course I always wear a hat, so I keep a bit shaded. Anything past 30 and I start whinging here, so I'm anything past 25 is uncomfortable for me. But I can cope with the cold. You see, the thing about the colder weather is you can put on more clothing, can't you? And that keeps me perfectly adequately warm. People in Scandinavian countries are fond of telling me there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing, which I sort of agree with, really. But of hot weather, you can only take off a certain limited number of clothes, which is dictated by social norms. And in fact, there are laws in the UK about that. And obviously, it's a family-friendly stream, so taking off t-shirts on stream is probably not quite appropriate. And I'm sure you wouldn't want to see that anyway. Attractive as I am for a 50-year-old middle-aged man. So let's not go there. Sunburn in England, says Glenn. Fiction. No, it's not. We actually have. Oddly enough, I think the record temperature for the UK is set up just up the road from where I live. We were living very, very close to it when it occurred. I think it may have recently just been beaten though. I think it was set in Faversham in 2003 at 34 point something degrees centigrade, which is pretty darn hot for the UK. I mean, nothing like the experiences that you've had in America recently with 40s, but anything 30 plus in the UK is considered pretty darn hot. What are the tattoos on my right hand? I haven't got any tattoos. I'm not a tattoo sort of person. It wouldn't be so bad, but he's mining crypto, yeah. All the heat coming out my piece. No, I'm not mining crypto. 26 Celsius, here's the Cyber Army, and that's in Northern Ireland. Here it's 26 right now as well, Cyber Army, so yeah, it's still really hot. Considering it's like 8 o'clock in the evening, it's still pretty darn warm. So, we can't see below your collarbones. Yeah, I don't exist below the collarbones. Actually, it's just a figment. Yeah, all I am is I'm just a hologram. Okay, think of me like that. Yeah. Of course, that begs the question of why do I look like this if I have a choice of what I look like? It's my reassuring, friendly uncle sort of persona. I'm the sort of slightly mischievous uncle that you wish you had when you were a kid, who's probably gonna get you into trouble, but will basically look after you. That's kind of that's friendly Uncle Drew. That's what I'm going for. Dear, the weather page keeps playing with my feelings. Basically, it's 30 degrees and shows rain from time to time. Several days. Yeah, so that's annoying, isn't it? Where it says like, because I like interesting weather. A good thunderstorm. I'll sit up and watch it. I'll sit and I like interesting weather, or hailstorms, or fog, anything like that. That's a bit kind of not what your normally weather is like. Because in the UK, most of the time, the weather is basically a bit overcast and there's probably some drizzle coming. That's what the normal weather in the UK is. So a sunny day is a bit of variety for a little while, and then anything unusual like hail or snow or fog is kind of like that's cool, or lightning and thunder and stuff like that. That's really good. Something exciting is happening. It gives us something even more to talk about. Currently 29 in Liverpool. Okay, that's way too hot. Mad Monk says, I thoroughly recommend an aircon. Now, aircon is a thing, isn't it? I mean, obviously it's a thing. I know it exists. I've come across it. But aircon in houses in the UK is really rare. Maybe it's because historically we haven't had the temperatures that kind of really require air conditioning. And to be honest, it's only a couple of months in the UK where air conditioning would really be all that useful. July and August are the months in the UK where temperatures, consistently go above 20 degrees. And the rest of the year, it's kind of, as I said before, overcast and a bit drizzly after lunch. It's basically the weather forecast for the entirety of the UK all of the time is overcast and a bit drizzly after lunch, unless something else is happening. It's totally random, basically. But a few people have bought. So aircon's interesting because I remember back in the 80s, nobody had aircon in the UK at all. We didn't even have it in cars back then. And then in the 90s, aircon started creeping into cars. And initially everyone was like, well, what's the point of that? We only have 3 days a year when it would be worth having, stupid idea. And then it sort of slowly became ubiquitous and everyone now loves having aircon in their cars. But it hasn't quite crept into people's houses yet. I don't think our houses are kind of really set up for aircon. There's nowhere to put an aircon device in most houses because our houses aren't built like that. They're built to be heated in the winter, but they're not built to be cooled in the summer by anything. Most people nowadays wouldn't buy a car without air conditioning in the UK. But 20 years ago, that was kind of like, what, aircon in a car? How extravagant. So a bit weird. I don't know. But I do like interesting weather. Wacky storm fronts and things like that. I think is all those kind of things are I love hailstones. Hailstones are just freaky. I mean, how do they work? It's solid things that form in the sky and then fall on the ground. That's clever. Anything like snow and frost, I love that sort of raining fish. I haven't seen that. It is a thing, isn't it? Because you get frogs and fish, and I don't think you really get cats and dogs. That's an expression, I think, but sharknadoes. But things can get sucked up from the sea and then dumped back on the ground, can't they? By really, really, really weird weather. I'm assuming it's some sort of tornado that sucks things up and then later on they get dumped. Frogs and fish and stuff. I like convertibles in Edinburgh, only used for 2 weeks of the year. Exactly. Usually mermaids. I haven't come across mermaids. Alligators. This is definitely turning into a fantasy discussion. We had hail the size of golf balls. So that is dangerous. Surely a golf ball falling out of the sky at terminal velocity must be very dangerous. Hailstones are well understood. Yeah, I've heard this. Yeah, I heard how they form. It just seems to me kind of like, okay, so it's a small seed. Sorry, that isn't a tattoo. Actually, that's some weird glow from the green screen. So I'll keep my hand away from that. It's because it overexposes when I'm too close. Yeah, it's and it forms ice. But what I don't quite figure out is how does it get to such a big mass before it falls down? I mean, mostly in the UK we get kind of little pea-sized hailstones, which I can sort of see that they would be, they would form and then fall out of the sky. But how do you get a golf ball-sized hailstone that stays in the air long enough to form? Is it debris en route? Is that how it works? So there's enough floaty stuff that it can accumulate that sort of mass before it hits the ground. So that is quite cool. So we had a couple of tornadoes around this way a couple of weeks ago. There was one in Barking, knocked over a few walls and tossed about a couple of trees. Absolutely wild for the UK. It's pretty down devastating, isn't it? Yeah. We had an earthquake down here in Ashford a few years ago, and it was, I don't know, something totally insignificant on the Richter scale, but it was on the Richter scale, like 8 or something like that. No, is it 8? 1? Maybe it was 4 or 5. Anyway, it was very, very low down. To the point where I was sitting at my desk, and I remember thinking, why is my desk moving? And the whole desk shuffled back and forth a couple of times, and then stopped. And I thought, that was weird. What happened there? And I was like, did I imagine that? And then I sort of was shuffling the desk like this, thinking, it's not loose. What happened there? And I kind of just dismissed it. And it wasn't until a couple of hours later. That apparently there'd been this earthquake, or very earth shuffle. I think it was basically. It wasn't 8. Oh, there we are, 4.5 to 5. There we go. True survives magnitude 8 earthquake in Kent. Well, obviously the UK isn't on a plate tectonic boundary, so we don't get too much. But this was supposed to be a intracontinental quake or however they were. Anyway, it wasn't a big earthquake, but it was called that. Yeah, because of course having an earthquake in Kent never happens. So the fact that we had an earthquake all of our own was big news for all the local media. So Kent suffers magnitude 5 earthquake was all across the headlines. Until somebody posted a picture of some garden furniture with one of the plastic chairs lying on its side, basically saying, "Scenes of Kent's devastation, we will rebuild." We do get a bit silly and overhyped. It was quite fun. We shall rebuild, exactly. I can't have reached further than Kent because it didn't reach me in Haver. Yes, it was a pretty, on the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a big earthquake. But I just remember being in the house and going, I'd never experienced an earthquake before in somewhere, at all actually. That's the only earthquake I think I've ever been in, and it's just everything shuffled like that, literally back and forth at a couple of inches, and it was like, what just happened? That was really weird. So yeah. Glenn says we've not had a good 6+ earthquake in quite a while. Well, don't think I want to wish that on you at all, Glenn. I'm not sure if there's anything above 6 is good in terms of earthquakes, particularly in California, because isn't sort of San Francisco, certainly the San Francisco way, isn't that sort of gearing up for a massive quake again? Isn't it sort of due or something based on plate tectonics? I don't know much about it, but I've kind of heard that. There are a couple of boundaries running through the North Sea, through the Netherlands, following the Rhine to the Alps. Okay, so there's some stuff down there. Okay. Californians don't have a good quake every so often. We think something's wrong. Dear. Glenn's experienced a 7.0. Youch. Okay, so that's probably enough to rattle things, isn't it? Talk Liberal says if the sea level dropped again, we can walk over to Holland and drink their beer. Well, that's the other thing actually about land masses. I think I'm right in saying, Commander O'Connor might be able to tell me on this actually, that because Scotland and mainland England are not actually the same land mass, that some weird stuff is happening to the British Isles as a result of it rebounding from the Ice Age 10,000 years ago, whatever the last Ice Age was, with the result that England is sinking. very slowly, and Scotland is rising. So Scotland's mountains at some point in the future will be even more impressive than they are now, whereas the whole kind of south of England will have been submerged under the sea. And some people would say, about time too. I think it's going to take quite a number of millennia for that to happen. San Francisco is always in danger of a big quake because the San Andreas fault, because that's the whole peninsula is moving in different directions, isn't it? Amongst us, Edinburgh Castle was built on a volcano at one point. So weird stuff. I'm not sure if I'd like to live through a volcanic eruption or a major earthquake, but I'd certainly find it interesting. But there we go. Mark Fid is desperately trying to get us on topic. Good for you, Mark. England sinking and Scotland rising. That's just Brexit. So yeah, the political movement is following the geological movement. England's going downhill fast. Touche. Yeah. Dear. Anyway, enough about the weather, because that's a mainstay of British discussion. Yeah, we could. This has been a minor distraction in the possibilities of British people talking about the weather. So there we go. But yeah, I must admit, I'm always fascinated by geography and actual weather. Extreme weather conditions and geography and things. I do find fascinating. It's probably that bit of my brain which is unhealthily obsessed with destroying the earth. I don't know. We've talked about this before in the stream. I have this fascination with apocalyptic stories and end of the world stories. Anything like that, I absolutely love. I like seeing humanity battle against an implacable foe in the form of a volcano or an earthquake or something. I don't know. Something slightly screwed up in my psyche, but I don't know. I like those sort of films. I particularly like post-apocalyptic things. Maybe there's some part of me that just wants the current world order to be swept aside, and then just a few of us travelling the wastelands in souped-up cars. Mad Max. If there was to be honest, if there was going to be a post-apocalyptic wasteland, I would vote for Mad Max. Mad Max 2, to be the one that I had to live in, because I think hooning around all day in a mad supercharged car with a dog, I'd be up for that. I think that would be quite good. Zibedian has studied volcanology. This is one thing that's really nice about these strings. There's lots of experts about doing stuff, which is really good. Drew Wager, now get back on topic. The end of the world, says Commander Ocon, like a global pandemic. Yeah, tick. Been in that pandemic. Been in that scenario. Right. Bilbo Gavin says, back on topic somewhat. Retcons, good or bad? Ooh, I'll get back onto that one. That's a good question. Mad Drew Road Warrior, yes. Oddly enough, and this is a very small distraction, the fact that I've got for those of you who know me well, I've got a supercharged MX-5, and the only reason I've got a supercharged MX-5 is because supercharged, and I can directly relate that to seeing Mad Max 2 when I was young, and he's got a supercharger on top of his thing, and it just makes this noise, and I just thought, I've got to have a car like that one day, and now I do. It's exactly because that film is to blame. So there we go. Anyway, never mind. Right, question. Bill Gavins, now back on topic. Retcons, good or bad? Right, we will get to the topic of the day in a moment, but that's a good question, and a serious writing question, which is retcons, good or bad? I must admit, I am mostly on the side of bad on this one. I don't like retcons. I generally find them... It's a lazy way of dealing with, either inconsistencies or troublesome stuff in your lore. I don't see the need for retcon if you've thought about the problem hard in the first place. And sometimes a retcon is just, in my humble opinion, a lazy way of dealing with it. But that never happened. Well, it did. We saw it. We watched it on the telly, or we read it in the book, or we played it in the game. It happened. I was there. No. It's gone. Now, I get that you might want to recycle your universe. I mean, I kind of understand what they did with Star Wars and Star Trek a bit, but I still think it's lazy. I think if you're a good writer, you can deal with the wacky stuff in your lore and embrace it and make it richer. So I've never come across a situation where I've had to retcon anything I've written because I've gone, yeah, that's not right. That I can't use that anymore. And I don't like them. I generally find most of the time, 90% of the time, I would probably say, that it's an unnecessary thing. I don't like it. I don't like reimagining. If you're going to write a new story, go and write a new story. Don't base it kind of on something that already exists, but take away from the original thing by changing it, but using some of the same names or something. So whilst I did quite like the reimagined Battlestar Galactica and quite like the reimagined Star Trek, I feel they're only pinching the name in order to get continuity and support. And what they're actually doing is they're telling a completely different story. And I'd rather they had the courage for it to be a completely different story, and not a retcon of something that's kind of gone before. So, yeah, so I tend to leave with Gren on that one. It's kind of messy and lazy. When he says, "Ooh, he's got a long answer." There we go. Mad Drew and Bad Drew. Should books have the questions got me thinking fast. Mad Monks up. Should books have a hero or a heroine? I think it depends on the type of book. Personally, I like having a hero or a heroine, and I don't mean that you can't have any other gender beside that. I think a leading person, shall we say, to be safe. I think it's a good. You want somebody. Most people, myself included, I think, want to have somebody to root for or somebody to dislike. You can have an anti-hero, obviously, or an anti-heroine, or an anti-thing. I don't know. Somebody to root for and somebody to kind of push against in a story. To me, stories are all about the characters. If you don't have anybody in the story who's memorable, you're sort of writing fictional history, and it's okay, but it's not, because we're human. I feel most of the time we connect with people, so whenever I've written anything, I've always spent time with the characters, basically, because I think that's what people like to get along. So yes, they need to have adventures, yes, exciting things needs to happen, there need to be car chases or space fights or swinging across vines through the jungle and doing dangerous daring do, but if you don't have a character to put into peril that people kind of either like or people like to not like, if that makes sense, then I think you're missing a trick. So yes, I think you need a person in there. It doesn't necessarily have to be a human, of course, but I think that's quite important. So is a retcon different from a reimagining? Depends if there's continuity in there or not. So a reimagining, again, I would sort of put it in the same category. Just tell a new story. Okay, you can be inspired. Let's take Battlestar Galactica. Yes, they've kind of reused a few bits and pieces, but not very much from the original show, to be frank. There's some stuff in there, but not very much. Why not just tell a new story? Because you are telling a new story, but you're sort of trading on the name, which is a little bit cynical from a marketing and money perspective, I suppose. So I don't know. That's kind of my view. Got to write a story about hunting space birds. Is that my NMS avatar? No, it's not. This is just a generic spaceman, which is a little bit overexposed to me. Frank Miner says the new BSG is a lot better than the old one. No, it's not. Slap. Yes, it kind of is. It certainly is in production value. But to me, the new Battlestar Galactica was so militaristic, hard sci-fi, whereas the original one was a slightly sort of comic space opera. I much prefer the original one. But I watched it first, and it's a very formative experience for me, the original Battlestar Galactica. So we can agree to disagree on that one. So my happiness is an Apollo astronaut. Yes, it is. So I've been watching your little series on what Apollo was doing in 1969 with some quite good interest, Glenn. So that's been very interesting. So I've not seen any BSG. Well, there we go, JR1990. You need to go and watch some BSG. Is a retcon disrespectful to what was made the original so good? I think it can be. You've got to be very careful with a retcon and a reimagining, I think. Unless, otherwise you're just sort of trading off the name. I did like the new BSG. I got into it. But it kind of wasn't Battlestar Galactica to me, because Battlestar Galactica is kind of gung-ho space opera as far as I'm concerned. And the new one just isn't. It's hard sci-fi. It's militaristic sci-fi, which is a totally separate sort of genre. We've talked about genres as well, but it's just a totally different style of show. It's all moody and mean, and it's full of torture, and it's full of dysfunctional people, which is gritty and realistic, and I get it, but it's not Battlestar Galactica. That's not what Battlestar Galactica was. Battlestar Galactica was a much more, supposedly slightly upbeat. I mean, it had a depressing start where everyone gets killed, obviously, but it didn't major on the death and destruction and the dysfunctionality. It majored on the family and we can prevail anyway kind of attitude. So very different flavoured film things. New BSG versus old BSG. Winter New. We got a split. You got split opinions, which is fine as to which one was better. But I get that. I enjoyed both, but I prefer the first one. The first one was just a Star Wars cash in. Well, yes, you can make that accusation as well. I think Asimov himself basically did say that, didn't he? He says, I watched Star Wars and that was okay, and then Battlestar Galactica came along and he says that was too much. I'd seen this before. You just like the Robo Daggett. It was a Daggett, wasn't it? Daggett. I did like actually that a lot of people don't like made-up names for things in sci-fi, do they? Daggett and Frack and what was the other one? Felgacarb. Oh, I'd love to know what does Felgacarb actually mean. There's some really quite good expressions. Frack. That was quite a good one. Felgacarb and they had different names for time measurements, centons and things like that, didn't they? Which actually, I suppose, has been an inspiration for me changing some of the things in Shapewood, which I hadn't thought of up until that moment. Frack, that's Felgacarb, yeah. How would you end the new BSG versus... Oh, no, I hated the ending of Battlestar Galactica, the new version. I thought that was dreadful. It was only one step removed from it was all a dream. And it was like, really? You're going to go there? After all that stuff, it's just, it's kind of it went kind of weird and spiritual at the end. I was like, what happened to the hard sci-fi show? I didn't like the ending of the new Battlestar Galactica at all. Of course, the old Battlestar Galactica never had an ending, so can't really go around to that. Aesthetics in terms of the new battles, yes, I did like that. Okay, a bit Robot Dog was good. Anyway, that's enough. Stop there straight away. 33 minutes in the stream, I haven't got something. Now, what I did want to talk about tonight, and again, anyway, feel free to chuck questions into the chat. Is transformations of things and the impacts therein. In quite a lot of fantasy and sci-fi, people get changed into things and then back again. Okay, deep waffling. Yeah, we've got extra levels of waffling. In fantasy, quite often people get transformed into other things. So let's take vampires. Okay, so some vampires can transform themselves into bats. Okay. And then presumably vice versa. And then in fantasy, you can transform into a dragon, or you can turn yourself into a snake or a cat, or any other creature. That whole kind of I'm going to be another animal. I started thinking about this on the weekend. Whilst I was driving my car, as you do, thinking, oh, okay, hang on a minute. Okay, so how does that work? Now in magic, I suppose you can do anything. But in science fiction, there's quite a lot of science fiction where people turn into different things, The first question is, where does all the extra mass go? If I turn myself into a cat, where does all the extra mass of me go? Okay, when I'm a cat, goes somewhere else in storage. And then if I want to become an elephant, where do I get the extra mass from? And if I transfer myself into a cat, if I turn myself into a cat, which to be honest I would quite like, I think I'd make quite a good cat. Is how do I suddenly learn how to be a cat? Okay, have I got to practice not only transforming myself into a cat, but learning how to be a cat? Because presumably, if I became a cat right now, I wouldn't know how to walk around. I'd have to relearn having to walk. Okay, and how do I make the tail work? Because I have no experience of moving a tail around. Because I'm a human being. And how do you swivel your ears and stuff like this? So obviously, the idea of turning yourself into an animal and turn yourself into a bird, great idea. But do you know how to fly? Or does it? Because most fantasy novels seem to sort of gloss over this problem in the sense that if you become a whatever it is, you're instantly able to be that creature, but you have none of the life experience that goes with being a cat, or an eagle, or a dragon. Let's start with something big. You become a very heavy cat. So I weigh about 12 stone, which that's an archaic measurement system that we use in the UK. Let me find out what that is in international numbers. That's about 76 kilos. That's about what I weigh, okay? So 76 kilo cat isn't going to work, is it? And if I turn into a 76 kilo elephant, I'll probably blow away in the wind. So that's not going to work. Commander O'Connor says caterpillars transform into butterflies. They do, but they sort of have to dissolve themselves into goo and then reform themselves to do it. Now, call me paranoid, but that doesn't sound like a very pleasant experience. Chris Viking says, well, we could train your hunting skills with a bit of paper on a piece of string. It's fun and educational. Catch that string. So I think there's some problems with this whole transform yourself into another creature. Not necessarily with conservation of mass. Where does the mass go? And so on and so forth. But most of these creatures have very different sensory perception to us. Okay, so a cat, for example, has eyes with slit irises. Unlike ours are circular. Okay, so our eyes are adapted for motion in kind of all directions, but they're not particularly good at any of them. Whereas cat eyes, I think I'm right in saying this: the vertical slits that cat eyes have mean that they are able to detect left and right motion far better than we can, whereas they're a bit weaker in the up and down motion. I think that's right, or it's the other way around. It's one or the other. And so perception of the world through different sense organs that these animals have is going to be very different. Okay, I'd just be a big cat. No, see that. So that could be a thing with transforming yourself into animals. You can only transform yourself into an animal of roughly equivalent mass. So I could become a small tiger. Or a panther, perhaps, but not a domestic house cat. Or maybe I could become a very large dog. Jonathan, Wizard of Earth, he dealt with it quite well. I thought when Ged transforms into a hawk, it's explained he gains the instincts of the animal, and it's dangerous for him to stay in that form for too long. Otherwise, he'll lose his humanity. That's quite nice. Yeah, so I quite like that. Or a very small elephant, increasingly larger elephant. Yeah, you see, there we go. I mean, that's a good thing. Turning into a fly, okay? So, a fly has 6 legs. Okay, and a pair of wings, and eyesight, which is kaleidoscopic. So how, if you transform yourself into a fly, no idea. What do I do with these 6 legs? And there's not enough space for your brain. Okay, so if you did transform yourself into a smaller creature than you actually start out with, would you retain enough presence of mind, because you've only now got a tiny little brain, to be able to transform yourself back? Would that be a one-way step? 76 kilo fly. Probably wouldn't fly, would it? So that I'm not convinced about. Yeah, and if you think about, I mean, fly is a good example, but I mean, what about an octopus? I mean, 8 legs, or a creature that has no eyes, like a starfish or something like that. With 5 sort of pointy bits. Or a centipede. A centipede with hundreds of legs. I mean, how do you get that to work? So you kind of wave it away slightly with the, you just. You because you're that creature, you kind of pick it up. Now, I don't think that would work. It becomes a larger elephant with each passing crisp. Yeah, there is that problem too. So I think that's I'm quite pleased actually, Jan, that you've mentioned Wizard of Earthsea, because being stuck in an animal form for too long, maybe you would start to lose your appreciation of what it meant to be human. But how many of us, given the choice, would be a particular type of creature? Now, I quite like the idea of being a cat, actually, or maybe a tiger. Not in an endangered species kind of way, but being a tiger would be would be quite cool. Or maybe some sort of flying creature might be quite good. Who would want to be a starfish? Yeah. But what happens if if somebody a hostile wizard turns up and turns you into a starfish? Then what do you do? What would be the impact of being turned into another creature? So I don't know. Science and magic do. Yeah, so it's just one of those things. I mean, it's generally slightly wackier fantasy novels that deal with being turned into different animals. But it's quite a common kind of thing in fantasy to be transformed into another creature. And I just wonder whether it would be so disorienting. And would you have the presence of mind to be able to transfer yourself back? And with what? Because presumably you cast a spell quite often with a magic wand. So you, how does a fly lift a magic wand? To do stuff with. Apex predator, the only choice I would be a human. Yes. So. And that's the thing, in magic you can transfer yourself, and there's a bit of science fiction that deals with this actually, which is quite interesting. When people have swapped gender as well, and as a result, either of magic gone wrong, or even science fiction gone wrong, that genders have been swapped. I know there was an episode of Star Trek that dealt with that once, that would be quite a weird thing. Is would you transfer yourself into another type of human being? Or an animal, or some hybrid form, given the choice, would you want to do that? You could probably work as a librarian if you were turned into an orangutan. Ook, I think is it. Oh, Wintermute's already been there. Yeah, ook is the only answer to that question. So in the Eddings books, they tended to train to be the animal, like they turned to owls or falcons or something, and had to learn how to fly as well. So that makes more sense. Is that the Belgariad? Yep. So maybe you train to be an animal. So I can kind of understand that, because I think if you were right this right this moment turn into a dog, then you probably wouldn't be able to walk. You'd have to figure out how to be a dog. And pass yourself off as a dog, and presumably retain enough, retain enough awareness that you are in fact a dog, and you need to cast a magic spell to turn back into a human. So careful with your words here. Yeah, so I'm only looking at it from a kind of sci-fi fantasy. I mean, it's much more of an issue obviously nowadays. I won't labour the point too much, but. From a kind of science fiction fantasy perspective, just waving a magic wand and changing your physical appearance to something else, whether it be another type of human, gender or whatever, or into an animal, I find quite fascinating. Would any of us do it if it was just like a wave of a wand? Then what would you do? Would you... Because then again, you're also straying into the I make myself younger and better looking kind of thing as well, wouldn't you? Potentially, or are you happy with who you are? I don't know. And then I suppose where I was going with all this was, what are the psychological impacts of doing this? Let's journey into sci-fi again for a moment. See, this is what I'd be worried about, Glenn. You're quite right. Turns into a dog, and suddenly that whole thing, I just need a biscuit. All I need is a biscuit. And then your entire life is, well, he turned into a dog, and then, well, we never really heard from him again. He just stayed a dog, looking for a biscuit. So I'd be worried about that. I would be very concerned that if I turned into a Labrador, that I would would never stop being a Labrador, because it would just be an eternal quest for biscuits. Wizardry is the domain of humanity. Wizard transforms into dog. Dogs can't do magic. Wizard stuck as a dog, fully aware that he should be human. Yeah, so I mean that's I think that's a good thing actually, Jonathan, here is the slightly unsettling stroke horror side of it. I mean, if you were let's say you were forcibly turned into a dog, and you were aware that you'd been turned into a dog, but you had now no way effectively to communicate that you were in fact a dog, and because everybody would just see a dog, okay, and I suppose the best you'd be able to do, if you let's assume you retain your intelligence, how would you explain to people that you were in fact a dog? So they're, I think, and fantasy and sci-fi has approached these sort of things. Bedknobs and broomsticks, Professor Brown turns himself into a nice fluffy white rabbit. Then cats can be able. Yeah, so you've got to be careful if you turn yourself into a small creature for the sake of convenience. That some other larger creature isn't around at the time and goes, aha, snack time, So that's a problem. The sci-fi story that deals with changing into different creatures. Yeah, so Glenn, the fly. Oh, now the original fly. I remember seeing that when I was quite young. I must have been 14, 15, and I saw the original The Fly, not the modern one with what's his name from Jurassic Park, but the original one, and I remember being so scared. I mean, it must be laughable now because I haven't seen it since, but the idea that you end up with this sort of half man, half fly mix. There was basically the full size fly, and then the kind of little man's head on a fly. It gets stuck in the spider web at the end, and it kills him, doesn't it? I think, to put him out of his misery before he gets eaten by the. I remember being totally terrified by it. Jeff Goldblum, that's right, yeah. So he's done the more modern version, which has obviously got better special effects and stuff. But I remember it's the original one, which the special effect, it was black and white. I think the special effects must look laughable now. But I remember, back when you were a child, those things. You didn't notice the special effects, you just noticed it. And I remember being really quite unsettled by it. And the idea of being transformed into another animal and then losing yourself in that process, I think would actually be really, really a horrible thing to experience. There's even some childhood literature. I've got a lovely book which I do actually love, called what's it called? It's up on the shelf. Let me get it. There we go. This one. This is actually my favourite childhood book, and I got a copy on eBay. So I don't know if any of you have read this one. Diana Wynne Jones is a very, very good. I mean, she's long dead, but Diana Wynne Jones is a very good young adult author of kind of years ago. And Dog's Body is my favourite childhood story, and I managed to find it. And it's basically this godlike being gets transformed into a dog on the earth, who grows up as a dog, with an owner, a young girl who basically assumes she has a dog, and doesn't realise it's this sort of godlike creature that's been turned into a dog for some punishment. And it's a very, very clever story, but it's definitely worth checking out if you've not. So when it comes to sort of godlike being, manipulating, reducing, adding some atoms and molecules to an organism to change their species, at what point does the original organism, not just a regular... Well, that's a good question. Human turning into a cat, at what point does it just become a regular cat and not a human? Well, that's a very good question. So and that goes back to things that we've touched on in these streams before, which sci-fi and fantasy does touch on, is what makes you you. It's like, and we talked about this in the context of technology, haven't you? How much of you, if we transferred your brain in, your brain processing into a computer, is that you? If you turn into a cat physically, and all you can do is meow, what essence is it of you? What does you even mean in this context? Okay, so that's a hard one. James Herbert wrote Fluke. Yeah, so a dog who thinks he's a man, or a man who thinks he's a dog. Cascades of Metamorphosis is one class. Yeah, so there's lots of science fiction and fantasy that's talked about this. He's more machine than man. All those sort of things. So how much of you? I mean, if I replaced my arm with a biological, a mechanical appendage, I would still be me as far as I was concerned. I could replace. I feel, technology existing, probably 90% of my body, and I would still be me. I suppose in my personality resides in my brain. That's what I'm sort of assuming. So theoretically, then I could replace eyes, ears, nose, mouth, most of my head, and I would still be me. So is it literally just my brain I'm worried about? And then what part of my brain? Because my brain is just a. Am I me? Just a collection of configurations of neurons? Is that what I am? Is it important? I don't know. Okay, and if I'm turned into a dog, is it my essence of my thinking processes that remains me when I'm the dog? Am I aware that I'm a dog? Am I effectively therefore a human brain in a dog? And how does my human brain then cope with the fact that I'm a dog and that I've now got 4 legs and a tail, no arms, kind of, a nose? I don't know. Those are the sort of the questions I lie awake thinking in the middle of the night. What would it really be like to be a dog? What are we? What's the essence of us? And in let's go into science fiction for a moment. This happens in science fiction, that people get transmogrified, don't they, into alien creatures. Star Trek is brilliant at this. Is that somebody gets infested with a parasite or something, which the doctor in question, whether it's McCoy or Dr. Crusher or whoever it happens to be, can't stop, and they get transmogrified into some sort of alien being, which rewrites their DNA and stuff like this. They become the alien, and then are they still them? And, usually by the end of the Star Trek episode, they've found some way to reverse the DNA change shift and reconstitute their original matter from a trace in the transporter bags or something like that. But what would it be like to be translated? Turned into an alien life form? That's another one coming around. And if you replace, that's a good question. What if you replace what's in the brain? So, surely the brain is just an apparatus. I mean, we're getting into, again, sort of slightly mystical places here on the street, but it's a good question. How, could we potentially create a blank, shall we say, a blank brain in which you could carve your neuron configurations into? Would that be you? Because I hate to all let you know this, but you haven't been you since the you that you were, I don't know, let's say 20 years ago. Not a single cell in your body is the same as you were 20 years ago. So in any reasonable physical way, you're not you anyway. So the me who was 30, those cells have gone off somewhere else to be something else right now. All the atoms and the molecules that made me when I was 30, and they're no longer me. I'm a collection of different atoms and molecules than I was 20 years ago. And when you think like that, what am I? Because I kind of am another thing now. All right, I'm not the same. If you take it down to actual physical matter, I'm not the same Dru-id as I was 20 years ago. Quite literally, I am a different thing. I am not composed of the same set of atoms, right? Neither are you. So in some ways, you have, you have actually become another thing, in a weird, like, slow motion sort of way. So I don't know how quickly it is. I think some cells are faster than others. I mean, we shed skin all the time, which is why you have to vacuum your house every few days. And our hair obviously grows. But I think our blood cells are replaced quite quickly. Our bone marrow is replaced quite quickly, and so I think I read somewhere. I don't know quite what the details are, but I think within a 20-year lifespan, every single component of your body is effectively refreshed, and it's not the same componentry as you had before. So that so therefore, definition of you. What does that mean? It's clearly not physical matter, is it? There we go. Skin cells live about 2 or 3 weeks. Colon cells have it rough. They die after about 4 days. Sperm cells have a lifespan of about 3 days. Brain cells do typically last an entire lifetime. Okay, so are they? There goes my dog. It's just going to turn back into a human in a moment. It's been watching the stream. So I don't know. So it's interesting. Okay. Is even if not everything is changed, I'd be interested to know whether or not brain cells, if they're not replaced, are their physical componentry at the atomic / molecular level, are they replaced or not? I don't know the answer to that question. Have I watched the show Altered Carbon? I haven't watched it yet. No, it's on my list of things to do. But I think, particularly in a sci-fi context, that the idea of transferring your essence, whatever we decide that actually is, with some other physical essence is clearly not beyond the bounds of reasonable science, let alone science fiction. So you probably aren't the person who you were a few years ago, literally. Yep. So what makes us unique? Is it just a configuration of electrical charges in our neurons in our brain? I There lies madness. I'm not sure. I think I find that sort of stuff absolutely fascinating to think about. And then the other thing I think that's interesting from a science fiction perspective is you get and Star Trek has this thing anyway, doesn't it? That you need to resolve things for an episodic basis because they need to be up for the next show, for the next episode. So whatever happens to you needs to be solved. But quite a few members of the Enterprise crew obviously either get transformed into some alien monster or strange things happen to them, which obviously gets reversed by the end of the show. And what always amazes me is how they just brush it off. What happened to you today? I got transformed into a 6-legged tentacle machine. Did you? Okay, yeah. Well, I got genetically mutated into a lobster, but I got better, So you could just sort of imagine. Whereas I think actually in real life there would be a certain amount of trauma associated with being transmogrified into a newt or something like that, particularly if it was against your will. And imagine for a moment if you I got better. Yeah, exactly. Good spot. So if you were, let's take a Star Trek episode where one of the worst Star Trek episodes actually, I think in Voyager, where they go past warp 10, which of course is impossible. In the canon of Star Trek, and Janeway and Paris, I think, turn into, I don't know, some sort of lizardy thing, and then they obviously get better at the end of the show. Now, if you knew you were and Spock's brain, yeah. But if you knew you were slowly undergoing some sort of DNA trans, thing, and presumably it was a survivable experience, which it probably wouldn't be, but yeah, let's go for it. Let's make it survivable for the sake of the story. At the beginning of the episode, when things are going from bad to worse, and from the perspective of you as the victim here, not knowing in the moment whether there was going to be a cure, And even if there is a cure, would you come through it unscathed? The idea of being transmutated, or whatever the word is, into, let's say, a lower life form. Let's say a dog or a cat or an alien fish or something. The idea of losing yourself, losing your humanity, losing your physical appearance, losing everything to this process that's effectively infected your body. I would think that would be utterly horrifying to experience. I mean, you certainly wouldn't brush it off after 45 minutes in the canteen in the Enterprise and go, guess what happened to me today? It would be an emotionally scarring experience, which you'd need, I think, quite a lot of therapy to cope with. Rob says that the only person who ever seemed to carry any baggage was Picard, but he was assimilated into the book. So at least they covered that. Being assimilated against your will. I thought that was quite good. He had effectively some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder, didn't he? Which is good. So that I think is a good one, because I think that would be a much bigger problem than it's kind of made out to be. You get transformed into an alien blob of some kind. You just don't. I mean, I think Voyager did it quite funny with Paris and Janeway, because she basically quips to him at the end of the episode. I never thought. I have thought about having children, but I never thought of having them with you. It sort of defused it quite well. But that's a very Star Trek episodic thing to say, isn't it? And all the transporter. I mean, I would never go in a transporter. I mean, I'm with Dr. McCoy on this one. I don't want my atoms scrambled across space, because that sort of technology. We talked about the technical problems with transporters, before on the stream, in terms of they're really rather tricky to make work in any reasonable way. They're proper fantasy, really, rather than at the moment anyway, because the amount of data that you have to store and the amount of energy you need to use, it would be an awfully lot easier just to go and land on the planet in the first place than use a transporter. You even need one of the things I worked out, actually, and a proper astrophysicist friend of mine confirmed this for me, that a transporter, you need to be able to resolve, as in be able to focus on. So imagine you need to put an atom effectively. Let's assume the transporter works at the atomic level. It could possibly work at the molecular level, but I'm not sure if that's enough. But let's assume it has to work at the level. That means you need to focus your transporter beam, whatever that is, accurately at and place an atom in a particular locale, okay, at range. Now, if you're going to do that from orbit, which is where the Enterprise usually is, let's say it's in a relatively low orbit, okay, usually tends to, let's say it's about where the ISS is, so that's, give or take, let's go from, it's a bit more than this, but let's say make it easy numbers, 100 miles up, okay. What you actually need to do is you need to have a device that can focus at an atomic distance at 100 miles away. Now, that in order to do that optically, you'd need a telescope which is about 3 miles across, which clearly the Enterprise isn't. So it's not entirely clear how the Enterprise transporter beam is able to focus and resolve a location down to an atomic radius at the distance that the transporter operates at. And that's and then forget about the whole warp drive beaming thing that they invented in a reimagined Star Trek. How do you resolve something an atom wide at warp speed from several light years away? I mean, it's just total nonsense. Maybe there's some subspace stuff going on. Maybe it is. I don't know quite how the transporter is supposed to work, but there's some definite practicals. But the whole thing, and the psychological effects of going through a transporter. I mean, it has been touched on in Star Trek. The idea that actually your entire physical self is being dematerialized, and then there's sort of matter streams and bits of technical babble. When you're reassembled at the upper end, it's not the same matter that's being used, as I understand it. I'm not quite sure where the matter goes to or comes from in Star Trek, but the idea of a teleport or a transporter is that your physical form is sort of catalogued and stored, and then effectively destroyed, because you don't need two of you. The pattern is somehow transferred down to the surface, and then something, without any device at the other end, is able to reassemble you at the atomic. Let's assume it's the atomic level, accurately, and then that is now you. But is it? Yeah, because physically, it is, but it's actually not the same person. In the same way that we're not the same person that we were 20 years ago, the transported person is no longer the same person, kind of, maybe. So I don't know. It's space magic. That's exactly what it is. Space magic. It's not just the physics, it's the Deus Ex Machina. The best episode of Trek always featured a... so it is... the transporter is a very neat device. And I understand it from a writing perspective, and I understand it particularly from a special effects perspective from... we haven't got the budget to land the spaceship. So we're going to beam down. I completely get that. I understand why it's there. But teleportation and transporting and whatever it happens to be is quite a staple of science fiction, isn't it? Because it's a convenient way to get somewhere quickly. So a transporter, Scotty appearing in a TNG episode and getting to work together with LaForge was a very nice episode from what... Yeah, so that was a good one, wasn't it? Yeah, because Scotty was in a transporter beam for many, many years. Bill Gavin says, a bit off topic, I've just had an idea for an episode, deities and godlike beings. Yeah, so I mean, we should probably talk about God at some point, but we'll do that in another stream. I saw an article earlier on today saying that physicists have now been able to image a hydrogen atom's electron orbital, like actually taking a picture of the wave function. Considering how impossible that's supposed to be, I'm not discounting anything. Well, I think it's very wise not to discount things, isn't it? Because us writers of science fiction are not very good at seeing into the future, are we? I would say possibly Arthur C. Clarke was one of the best at predicting what the future might be like, but he's way off base, wildly optimistic in some and missing some innovations entirely in others. Most science fiction doesn't date well, does it? It very, very quickly looks old, and it tends to be kind of an iteration beyond where we are today. So if you look at the and we talked about this before as well, but if you look at 60s sci-fi, it's all switches and coloured lights and flashing gizmos. If you look at 70s and 80s sci-fi, it's all touch screen technology. And if you look at all the sci-fi that's been out recently, it's all holograms, isn't it? That's just how it is. At the moment we can't kind of do holograms, but once we do holograms, that will be passé, and science fiction will have to think of something else to do rather than holograms. So science fiction isn't very good at predicting the future. It's fascinating to see science fiction of the 60s and 70s talking about storing things on tape and film, when of course that feels ridiculous to us nowadays, because obviously we know that tape and film aren't being used anymore, everything's digital. Actually I think somebody on the stream a few weeks ago basically said that the computing capacity that data on Next Generation is reported to have is now beginning to look rather pedestrian, based on the fact that computer technology has moved on in the last sort of 30 years. Montuxia, yeah, I was always quite... Actually, that one's not bad, is it? The Star Trek Hello Computer. Hello Computer. Working. I wish Alexa... I've got Alexa in my house. I wish it would respond with working. There we go. And you can ask, things like Alexa, some relatively sophisticated things, but nothing like you could ask the original Star Trek computer from the 60s. So some things haven't quite caught up, but some things are pretty close. Digital tape is still a thing, yeah. So for backup purposes and stuff, but a lot of the stuff that's in the sci-fi has dated quite badly because technology has simply caught up and moved on. When you look at the tricorders and the kind of laptopy things in Star Trek: The Next Generation, they look really clunky by modern standards. And oh yeah, Boston Dynamics and their robotic, those robotic dog things. They scare me. I think if I saw one of those in a dark alley with laser lights, I would be thinking, "This is it. This is the end of Drew." Those things are seriously quite freaky. You can use Alexa, to go to red light. Actually, I when I first got the Alexa, I spent many happy hours asking it Star Trekky things like fire the photon torpedoes. Do you want some toast? That's a good one to ask Alexa. Now somebody's setting fireworks off. Oh, God. Why are they doing that? And that's upset all the dogs in the neighbourhood. Those sort of things. And 2001, of course, the HAL 9000 computer. So that computer is, I think in the 60s and 70s, that's where they thought computers were gonna go. And of course, they haven't gone that way, haven't they? Our computers are very clever today, but they haven't evolved like science fiction authors thought they would. Science fiction authors were always concerned with computers becoming too intelligent and outwitting us by being almost sentient, sapient creatures. That so far hasn't happened in any meaningful way. Our computers have got very, very fast, very, very powerful, but they're still dumb terminals, compared to the sci-fi worries of the sort of 60s and 70s. Commander O'Connor says, you had to say Alexa, bloody thing is interrupting you now. so that's quite fun. So across the world, if I say, Alexa, would you like some toast? And they're all going to respond. Sorry, that's just very, very mischievous of me. That was a firework in space. It was definitely a photon torpedo. It was quite close range, actually. I don't know where that was being launched from or why. JR19 here. I shall check that link out. I'm going to click on it and I'll check that out later. Open the pod. Actually, yes. If you ask Alexa, open the pod bay doors. Come on, Rick, I'm going to hit me in a minute. Wintermute says most sci-fi writers didn't understand computers and AI. No, I suppose that's true. So, and as a science fiction writer, it's difficult to be. Glenn says this is why I don't own an Alexa device because of Drew's dream. Commander O'Connor's gone. He's done. What poor Commander? If that worked. Poor Commander O'Connor is now listening to an explanation of all the different varieties of bread product that Alexa doesn't like. Dear. Sorry about that. Things like said computer lady who must not be named this is why you listen to Drew headphones. Oh darn, fall again. She's a toy. Okay, she does have a few uses. You can say things like set an alarm for 15 minutes time. What's the weather? What's in my calendar? Play some music. You can those sort of things. Okay. Finchard said my Alexa responded with the rest. Oh, I've got more where those came from. Whenever I see an Alexa around anybody's house, I always make sure to say things. Twitch Barrett's got the truth in. I can cause Alexa mayhem across the entire world. Sorry. But they're clever and but they are toys. Whereas the science fiction of yesteryear would have us believe that we would by now easily have virtually infallible. Turned her off now. That's just cruel. I've now been responsible for the not quite the death, but the you put Alexa to sleep. We kind of expected to be a lot further along with things like that. That's where science. And it's interesting that some things in science fiction have been wildly over optimistic. Like 2001, space stations in space, and frequent kind of tourist flights to hotels in space. Didn't happen. Big manned spaceship to Jupiter. Didn't happen. And so on and so forth. Whereas the rise of handheld devices that can do amazing things, the full motion video and video recording capture, no science fiction author ever predicted any of that. So some things have really come on quite impressively, and science fiction kind of now looks quite pedestrian. And other things, science fiction still looks really advanced and way out there, and we haven't been able to catch up. And some things, I suppose, are just much, much more difficult to do than they appear. Now, I mean, tourist flights to space, I suppose, arguably we're kind of getting there with Mr. Bezos and Mr. Virgin. What's his name? Richard something. My brain. Branson, there we are, Branson, Mr. Richard Branson. So that's kind of getting there, but it's the problem with Richard Branson's and Jeff Bezos stuff is that, and I know this is slightly controversial, it's not quite space, is it? Really? I mean, to me, going into space means you need to be outside the atmosphere in an orbit. That to me probably counts as space. Now, I don't want to take anything away from those guys in terms of, and all the engineers who've worked on stuff, because that is a big technological achievement to make a spaceship that does that sort of stuff. But part of me is going, yay, and the other part of me is going, it's kind of a bit pointless, really. It doesn't go anywhere. The whole point of going into space is to go somewhere, as far as I'm concerned. So I don't quite count that as, if I could take a ship like that and go to a space station, check into that space station as a hotel, have a room, stay there for a week or so, enjoy the experience, and have the option of catching a shuttle to the moon and back, then I'd feel I was living in a sci-fi novel. But as it stands at the moment, there's nowhere for any of these spaceships to go, and they can't go anywhere anyway because they're not above the atmosphere, are they? So it's not rich souls in space as kind of I kind of do subscribe to that a little bit. It's a space thrill ride. I would like to go on one because there's nothing else to compare to it right now, is there? But they are a bit pointless. Now, maybe they are stepping stones to greater achievements, etc., etc., etc. But at the moment, I don't. Beyond what that thrill ride, what's the point? They're not going anywhere. There's nowhere to go. Open day at the International Space Station. Come aboard, say hello. Piglets and hey, Dru-ids, just wanted to say. Oh yeah. Let's not worry about moderation on internet forums. There are far more concerning things to be worried about, Piglet Stand. Glenn's promised to take me up if he wins a flight on the International Space Thrill Ride thingy. He's going to take me, isn't that right, Glenn? So we'll both go together. You can take the video and I'll also take some notes. We'll report back. I don't know. So anyway, so that's so all this stuff about the impacts of being changed, and it kind of ties into some of the other stuff that we've talked about in terms of things like who am I and what am I, and in the sci-fi context, is that even a question that matters in the future? At some point it seems likely to me, and I don't know how close we could be to this point in terms of actual real years, but it seems likely to me that you would be able to transfer the essence of you. And let's assume the essence of you is the configuration of neurons in your brain. That has got to be, surely, although it must be hugely complicated, at some point in the future, surely it's got to be something that you could map and therefore store and therefore digitize and therefore upload and download into some other medium. That seems within the realms of possibility to me. But the trouble is, the moment you digitize something, you can duplicate it. Okay, so I could back myself up from Sunday evening and go, Monday, I already screwed up Monday, I'm going to try that again. I'm going to restore myself. That didn't happen. Literally didn't happen because it wasn't me. I've destroyed that future version of me, and I'm back to Sunday evening. I don't know. Is that something that even makes sense? Funny thing is, if you were to transform yourself into a dog, you might stand a chance of going up in space. I suppose, yes. There definitely have been dogs in space. And then, what does that mean for, you could download your previous selves? I mean, what would the ethics of doing that be? Okay, well, here's your great grandfather. We digitized him back in 2070. Before he died. So this is great Uncle Drew, who's now been on this storage medium for 200 years. Let's just reinstate him for a moment in some computer simulation, I suppose, and ask him, Drew, you were alive in the 2030s. What was it like? So hang on a minute, who am I? Oh, you're a computer simulation of yourself. I don't want to be a computer. What do you mean I'm a computer simulation of myself? If somebody somehow managed to digitize your mind right this minute, and then in 100 years' time you suddenly came back to consciousness inside some sort of framework without your body, in some sort of disembodied mind state, what would your reaction be? I think that's an interesting thing for science fiction to sort of play around with. A Drew headroom, exactly. I'd be a kind of, what am I? Who am I? Am I a computer generated? I'd have so many questions, and I don't know whether or not it would just be, well, do I exist or do I not exist? Am I just what is the essence of being me? We uploaded Mr. Wager into the computer, now to transfer him back. Oh dear. A Windows update just came in his blue screen. Yes, I'm pretty sure I would probably crash the operating system of a computer. Right, sci-fi writing prompt: man transforms his consciousness into a dog and gets selected by the USSR to go into orbit in the 1960s. Yeah, you see, I don't know, what would be the impact? There was a science fiction story, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it was, where basically somebody is in an accident. I think they go to Pluto or something at some point in the next 100 years or something like that, and they have an accident. They run out of oxygen and they die. Okay, but then one of them wakes up, and he discovers over the course of it's a short story, I can't remember what the name it is, but he discovers over the course of this short story that actually he's a reconstituted brain in a tank. His body has long since perished, but the technology of the future has managed to sort of scan his brain patterns, clone his brain structure, and then reinstantiate his brain patterns into this cloned brain, and therefore he's effectively reincarnated, but all he is a physical, he's just a brain in a tank, and they can feed him sense impressions into his reconstituted brain, because they basically, and they've done it kind of unethically by the standards of our century, just to understand the accident. And they say, no, we plan to destroy you at the end, we're just here to understand the nature of the accident. And of course he's got this existential thing, but I exist, you brought me back to life, I'm still here, I'm still alive, you can't murder me. Yes, we can, we created you, we could destroy you. And he basically ends up, I think, going mad, trying to deal with this existential, do I exist or not, in the short story. It starts off quite good, and then it kind of gets to this really metaphysical, uncomfortable place. It's like, what does that mean? All those sort of things. The chat's moving too fast for me now. So Drew lives inside an Amazon server. Yes. There's going to be a device in the future. It's not going to be called Alexa. It's just going to be called Drew. You could ask it for things, and it will just waffle on for half an hour. Dear. There was an episode of Star Trek that had Moriarty in. Oh yeah, so that's a good episode. We watched that one relatively recently. That he became a sentient thing, didn't he? I've actually been driving down the highway at speed and thought, what would my great grandfather think of this everyday experience? Probably scare themselves. Yeah, I have that thought a lot. Is my grandfather? I didn't know my great grandfather, but my grandfather died in 1985, and I kind of sometimes wonder, if I could sort of bring him back for half an hour, what he would make of the modern world, and just have that conversation. What do you think? And what would he think of? Because of course he last able to see me as a young boy, and now I'm a middle-aged man. So Wintermute, mapping human consciousness has been covered in many sci-fi novels. Yes, it's a common one, isn't it? I don't know. All these things are really difficult to kind of work out what they mean. I don't know. Would the copy think it was you before it? Yeah. And if you could digitize a human mind, which is the original, and doesn't matter, because if I've got a JPEG image, I can make a perfect digital copy of that JPEG image, and for all intents and purposes, because they're digital, they kind of don't exist in the real world anyway. They're just a collection of organized data. So who's to say what the original one is after a period? You can't wrestle with these kind of things. Bringing some historical person from the past back to experience them one day. I've had a dream where somebody like, I don't know, Isaac Newton, or somebody like Jules Verne, maybe. You bring them into the modern world just for a couple of hours. Hey Jules Verne, I just reconstituted you. I just wanted your opinion on what life in the 2020s is like. What do you think? And some of the stuff they would be utterly flabbergasted by that we can do. I mean, flying aircraft, things like that, they would probably be absolutely overwhelmed by. And the preponderance of screens and things, and lighting and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Some things would really take them by surprise. You'd be shocked at how expensive everything is. Yes, that would definitely be the case. The concept has also been covered in the game The Swapper, which you can make copies of yourself to survive the trials. The game ending is rather thought-provoking. I'll have to check that one. Just don't put your cloned data on the tape deck. You'll be fine. Don't put any magnets near Dad. No. I don't know. All that sort of stuff would be quite interesting. So I think there's metaphysical problems with this whole transforming yourself. Can you hear the space birds now? Something mad going on outside now. There's like loads of ducks flying around having an argument. That's really noisy. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to have to check that out in a minute. Metaphysical problems with who you are before you become a dog, or turn back from a dog. The problems of actually becoming a dog, and then being able to return yourself to a human if you retain the intellect. The problems of learning how to be a dog, and doing doggy things, or like walking around and wagging your tail. How you even interpret the senses of a different creature, because they are a dog's hearing and a dog's eyesight and a dog's certainly nose is way more sensitive than the human one. So what would that be like to suddenly have a sense of smell that was 100 times more powerful? I mean, that would be really weird. Things like that, and then the sort of psychological impact of being turned into a dog, or particularly if it was against your will, and even if it wasn't against your will, the shock of being a dog, I think would be quite profound. I don't know. Space ducks. I think that does sound like space ducks. It sounds like they're flapping around the sky. Not sure what's going on. Where is Space Sun? He'll be on his PC playing games at this time of night, playing modern stuff, not the retro stuff, stuff that I can't do. So he is about, but he's not here at the moment. We'd have to invent new words and concepts if you try. That's a good thing. We haven't got a frame of reference to understand what a dog's sense of smell would be like, because obviously it's second nature to them, but we're humans. We don't operate the same way. And the further you get away from human beings, I think your brain's ability to process the sense impressions that you get from another creature would struggle. I mean, I'm always quite amazed. I mean, I've got a small cat, which is most of the time is extremely boring, just stays asleep. But it does have interesting. It's got retractable claws. I mean, what does that feel like? That must be quite. That must be quite good. What's it like to pick up things with an elephant's trunk? I don't know. I'm not an elephant. All those sort of things. Or be a bird. To sense air currents under your wings and stuff as you're moving around. I mean, that must be quite phenomenal. But we don't get to experience that because we're not human. So I don't know. You'd be able to lick your balls. No one ever leave the house. And what we could see more of the electromagnetic spectrum. I mean, that's another fascinating thing which you could explore in sci-fi. I mean, there are snakes that can see into the infrared, aren't they? And I believe I'm right in saying that insects can see into the ultraviolet. So imagine if we had that ability to shift our sensitivity to the electromagnetic spectrum up and down through our eyesight. You could kind of switch to infrared mode or ultraviolet mode or something like that, or X-rays or something like that. Dogs can smell disease and drugs and things, can't they? They're famously good at that sort of stuff. So, what would that be like? Dogs already have words: woof, ruff, growl. You're saying things, but to my dog. So I don't know. So it's just I mean, I don't know whether that helps with your writing things, but maybe if you're going to transform yourself into another creature, or maybe even just transform yourself into a robot or something like that, or you're going to have to deal with the ideas of cross consciousness and those sort of things. Geordie's visor, that's another good one as well, isn't it? Yeah, because he has, he's blind, but he's got this thing that provides sensory input into his brain, and they've explored that one a little bit as well, which is quite good. All those sort of things, and I mean, and all the potential enhancements that we might be able to do to ourselves in the future, eyesight and hearing and those kind of things. It's the impacts would be quite profound, I think. So I don't know. It's definitely stuff to explore. It's food for thought for sci-fi novels and fantasy novels, I think. Okay, if you're going to become a dog, what's that going to do to you? Dear, all good stuff. Anyway, my friends, it is time, and I must depart because the temperature is still going up, and I need some good sleeping in this heat because it's a bit debilitating for poor people like me who don't like the heat. So, but there we go. Anyway, have a lovely week ahead. So obviously just Monday, so be good, do good things, and I will see you on Thursday for more No Man's Sky, which I'm increasingly I've got some solar panels out now, so you'll be very impressed by that on Thursday. And I haven't mentioned Maya from Space 1999. I must admit I need to go back and watch the second series of Space 1999 because I don't remember it. I remember Maya just about because she's a space alien girl, isn't she? Is she able to transform herself? I can't remember. Does she turn into different things? I need to go and do some research then. Should go and watch some episodes. I remember the first season of 1999 much better than the second one. So yeah, then I'll do some research on that one. But be good. I will see you on Thursday for some more No Man's Sky, and my continuing quest to. Which at the moment is very planet bound, is building a hut. So I've got some. I've got batteries as well. I've managed to figure out the batteries too. So you're going to be impressed on Thursday. Space 99 is on TV. I need to go and check that out because I do like that show. But be good. Take care of yourselves. Write on, commanders, etc. Or just write on, or 07 interlopers, whatever it is we're saying now. It's kind of become a mix. We should be back on Saturday for some more retro stuff as well. So a full week of streaming ahead. So anyway, be good. Take care, my friends. Look after yourselves. Don't get too hot. And I will see you all soon. Be good. Onwards we go. Take care now. Bye-bye.